Hey everyone. So today we're going to talk about Gore-Tex, specifically Gore-Tex in boots. And not only Gore-Tex, but some other things as like unlined boots, kind of like these Solomon Jungles, which have no Gore-Tex lining. And maybe versus something like these Akus, which have leather and textile, right? And there's these Lovas in the middle, which have suede. Both of these have Gore-Tex lining. The reason I want to talk about some of these boots is because a lot of people think Gore-Tex is sort of the end-all and be-all waterproofness and breathability. It is this cool material, but it does have its pros and cons. And so what we can go through today is like, how does Gore-Tex work? What are some of the pros and cons of it? And why might you choose a linerless boot that gets wet quick, but also dries quickly and breathes well, versus something in between, or versus something like the Akus, which have more limited breathing, but they do have textiles so they can breathe, versus something like these guys, which also have Gore-Tex, but are fully leather polished. You'll see there's no breathable textile material here. Why do these need to be Gore-Tex, if at all, or have a Gore-Tex lining? So, all right, let me get these out of the way. So the first thing is, what is Gore-Tex? I'm going to bring you guys to the screen here. So Gore-Tex is this material where there's a lot of other names about it. Really, it's just this material where I think it's some type of polyethylene more modernly now. It used to be made with some PFAS materials, but they found out that's killing people, so they're kind of phasing that out. And they're using some polyethylene stuff. At the end of the day, chemicals aside, what it does is it lets moisture vapor out, but it blocks thicker molecules of water from coming in through the material. This is why they claim, oh, amazing, your feet can't get wet, but it lets moisture from sweat out. Pretty cool. Now, that's not exactly true, because it could do one thing or the other. When something is like this material you see here with like this lining, this protection outer membrane, this could be leather, it could be textile, anything protecting the Gore-Tex. When this material gets saturated with water, there's no way for the moisture vapor to escape, right? Because this happens naturally. We're going to look at a video on the next slide, which shows how if you force air through, it can escape and you see the water bubbling. But other than that, when you have boots on, there's nothing pushing air through. So when you're standing in water or your boots are saturated, there's nowhere for the moisture to go. And so these Gore-Tex boots are great in that respect, is if your feet are dry, they're not too wet, moisture is able to escape. But as soon as they get water on it, it will stop most water from getting in the boot, but your feet are then just building up sweat and condensation anyways. So it's good to know how this works. I'll go to this video, you can see exactly how it's working. This example is being done with Tyvek, which works similar. Tyvek you might be familiar with a wrap it around your home typically, because that lets air out but stops water from coming in. So cool, you'll see they'll hook up this contraption. That water on the bottom is an example of maybe a puddle, maybe rain trying to get through. And you see when this person turns it upside down, water can't get in. But if they pump it, air can get out. Now the issue with that is, that's great, it shows how it's breathable, but she's using a pump to get the air out. You don't have that with your feet. And so when this Tyvek is wet, it is not breathing, but it can naturally breathe when there isn't water. So that's kind of like the 101 of how Gore-Tex functions. Works great when it's dry, when it's wet, it's no longer functional. It is serving a different purpose of stopping your feet from getting wet. So cool. In a lineup of boots, when you can see here, some are more breathable. Like here, example, there's no Gore-Tex. You have some leather, you have drainage holes here, you have some textile here. These boots are very breathable. These are Solomon Jungle boots, right? So you wear these when your feet are guaranteed to get wet and saturated, and Gore-Tex wouldn't keep it out anyways because water is probably going above your ankle. Another example you might have here is something that has Gore-Tex but is suede and is very air permeable. You might be able to see some little air holes here that let it breathe, and it has a textile tongue which lets it breathe as well. Here are the Akus, which is a mix of textile and a polished roughened leather, so it's polished on the outside. these are not as breathable, to something that's even more waterproof like these ones. Now these have Gore-Tex as well. My opinion is these boots, having Gore-Tex on these is almost pointless. The roughened polished leather is so many oils and protections on it that water's not getting in there anyways. Sometimes these boots do have a textile tongue where that does make more sense to have a Gore-Tex bootie, but that's the only time. All right, so when do you use one versus the other? I kind of went over it already, but let's go to these. All right. So these I mostly bring when I am going portaging. Some people will have like those keen sandals. You might wear slippers, Crocs, whatever works for you. Me, I prefer jungle boots because there's times I'm hopping in and out of a canoe, going through mud, going through rocks. Sometimes I'm carrying a heavy load. And my feet are getting soaked, but I also want the support and the stability and not dealing with rocks and pebbles getting in. Even with jungle boots, even though they're unlined, they do have this nice gusset, again, to keep sticks and stones out of there. So it's easy for me to hop in and out of a canoe. Even if I wasn't in a canoe, if I'm in really hot weather, where if I do need to step in a puddle or it starts raining, but if it's warm weather, my feet are gonna dry out. I've had these soaked and my feet have dried out within about 45 minutes of walking because they breathe so well. And so when you're dealing with, you're just saturated in water, situations where you're saturated in water, or you're just moving heavy and fast and you need to be light, you're going to want something that's unlined and you don't mind your feet getting wet. Now, depending on the temperature, you might want to avoid that and move to Gore-Tex. And so that's where something like more breathable, but have a Gore-Tex lining come in. So that's jungle boot. So here's another step up. So these are Gore-Tex lined, but these are still very breathable because they're suede. That means the thickest part of the leather with the tightest pores have been shaved off. That's how suede works versus these guys. These guys still have the thickest, tightest part of the leather on them, but it's been split off, and the suede is what's underneath the leather. So these are still very breathable, but they do have the Gore-Tex because I wanted them to be waterproof. They also have these ones, these Lovas, in unlined versions. Most of these boots I'm going to show you today, they have unlined versions, but I just happen to get the Gore-Tex ones. So when I wear these, I pretty much wear these in cooler temperatures where I'm not going to be trudging through a huge amount of water, some puddles, it might be raining. I do think I can keep my feet dry reasonably well, but I have a load on my back. It's warmer. Usually when I'm just hiking or camping, I'll be taking these Lovas because they're not so airtight that my feet will build up a bunch of moisture and start sweating. They're still able to breathe enough. All right, put those out the way. Now these and the Lovas are somewhat interchangeable. Now these ones have full leather, they're tight grained. This part of the leather is waterproof. There's no water really getting through here, right? Where water can get through is on this textile area you see here, which is what I think Echo calls the Air 6000. Really it's just a nylon weave, but it takes advantage of the Gore-Tex, of where it's very breathable, and as long as this doesn't get saturated in water, it will breathe with the Gore-Tex. But even with this, Gore-Tex still has limited breathing. Nothing beats, like, if this boot was unlined, or like the jungle boots I showed you earlier, those are way better for breathability. But if you're gonna have a Gore-Tex lined boots, if it's not suede, or it doesn't have these textiles cutouts here, your boot's pretty much not breathing. So I might use these if it's just a little too cool, like the Lovas just won't quite offer enough protection. I might be dealing with more sticks and rocks. I want a little more toe protection with that thicker leather, or even a heavier load, because the leather does offer more rigidity. So these are just sort of just a step up in rigidity in protection for my feet that also keep them dry because of the Gore-Tex, because of the leather. Now, in the most protected here, where again, these have Gore-Tex, but I'd suggest that they don't need the Gore-Tex lining, because if you look at these are heavy, high gusseted leather. there's no water getting in these or through this leather unless you're standing in water for a while where it really gets saturated. Even then, if you're standing in water for half an hour, you're saturated, something's going on where you have bigger issues than Gore-Tex boots. You got to get out of there. But here you are. And so sometimes boots like these do have a textile tongue where they need Gore-Tex to breathe. That's good. But even these offer the most protection. So these are like hunting boots. These are hunting boots, so they offer a lot of warmth. They offer some decent insulation. They are waterproof, and they offer a lot of support. So these are when I do my hunting trips. If you're on a mountain, they're very rigid. You want these as well. So there's some rigidity here. And if it starts raining or you're going through a puddle and it's cold, you don't want your feet getting wet. So if you're stepping in slush, you might want something like these as well. Now, again, I can't iterate this enough. Do you need Gore-Tex with these boots, looking at how thick and strong they are? Maybe, maybe not. I'd say no. But most of these just come with Gore-Tex anyway, so there you are. And that's it, man. So yeah, next time when you guys are going out and you're thinking of bringing a particular boot, don't just get any boot and always think you have to go with a heavy Gore-Tex boot. You can go unlined. Next time you're shopping for a boot, if you find yourself just dealing with a heavy boot and you want something lighter, you want to be breathable, you don't mind your feet getting a little wet sometimes, definitely look out and shop for an unlined boot or a Gore-Tex boot. Honorable mention, a very common boot, especially in the US you'll see because of the military, especially with them being in the Middle East for the longest, is a common boot that soldiers love and people are rough out leather boots because they're strong, they're still full grain leather, they breathe well, but they're unlined. These are something that are very comfortable. These I ruck with in the summer. I don't need the water protection, but I do want the rigidity and I do want a bit more of breathability. They do have the textile tongue and they're not quite as light and fast as a jungle boot like the Solomons, but they're nice in between where they're breathable as well. And so, yeah, just know that Gore-Tex is not the end-all and be-all, and you can just choose a boot appropriate for your adventure. Thanks a lot.